Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. Good morning, Sheila, and everybody else who's on the live stream today. Hope y'all are doing well, and we are continuing our study. Hey, Gail. Continuing our study today through the shortest books of the Bible. We've covered Obadiah on Monday. Yesterday we looked at the book of Philemon, and today we're going to actually look at two. We're going to look at the letters of 2nd and 3rd John. Good morning, Lyle. Good to see you on here. 2nd and 3rd John, we're taking two here today. Very similar letters, and total of 27 verses between the two, so it's about the same amount of coverage we're hitting with the other books, Obadiah, Philemon, and Jude we'll plan on hitting tomorrow. So anyway, appreciate y'all being on here today. As always, if you have any questions or comments during the stream, please feel free to put them here in the comment section, and I'll acknowledge them when I see them. So John is the author of 5 books of our New Testament. Of course, John's Gospel, and then you have the 3 letters or epistles for 2nd and 3rd John, and then, of course, the book of Revelation. And again, 2nd and 3rd John are very, very similar in some ways. They have a different audience, obviously, but they're very similar content. And John... So all of John's writings, when you look at commentaries and things like this, and the more I've got around 1,600 books in my library, and the longer I study for myself and just reading, man, I'm gonna tell you what, reading the Bible will clarify a lot of issues. Will clear up a lot of confusion if you just read the Bible. I remember when we were students in school. Hey, Linda. Remember when we were students in school, one of our instructors would say that the Bible sheds a lot of light on the commentaries. And the more and more you grow and the more you study for yourself, that really becomes true. Anyway, looking at the commentaries that are out there, looking at one of the main things I use those for now is to look at things like the authorship, the date, the audience, things like that about the book. Not so much the text and what a verse means, although I do that. But I think it's good to know, who is writing, to whom they are writing, when, and why. There are, well, like I said, I don't know how many commentaries I have on the books that John wrote. Okay, all 5 of them. I don't know how many, but every one of them that I have, and I would say I probably have anywhere from 20 to 30 on all of John's writings, date the books of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the book of Revelation. Well, the book of Revelation, I guess, would be an exception. So John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, all of them, good morning, Charles, are dated in the early to mid-90s, right near the end of the 1st century. And there's debate on the book of Revelation. Some believe it was written before AD 70. Some believe it was written like the rest of his books were, right near the end of the 1st century. And I will say a couple of things about the dating of books. Number one, some of that is speculative. Now, I think we can be a little more specific with Paul's writings because of his travels, because of his imprisonments and things like that. But the fact of the matter is, some of the dating of some of the books of the Bible does fall within the realm of speculation. In other words, you can't point to a verse in the book of, let's just say, the book of Revelation that says this book was written at this point in time. Now, again, there are varying opinions on that, and that's okay, but you're not going to find any biblical text that will tell you when a particular book of the Bible was written. And so a lot of those debates over the dates of the book, while they may have some points of importance, they are rather speculative. And in the long run, I've kind of adopted this mindset to some extent, not fully, but to some extent. It doesn't matter. The Bible still says what it says. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. 2nd and 3rd John, hey Debbie, 2nd and 3rd John, I've not found one commentator yet that believes 2nd and 3rd John were written earlier than the 90s. Anyway, let's get beyond that. let's get into the text. So 2 John, hey Diana, good to see you on here today. The little book of 2 John, the letter, rather, of 2 John is written by the elder, the presbyteros. And in fact, 2nd and 3rd John start out that way. And this is John referring to himself not in an official capacity as an elder in a local congregation. He's writing as an old man. And so he refers to himself as the old man, in essence, the elder. 2 John is written to the elect lady and her children, whom John loved in the truth. We don't know who this was. Some take the opinion that, well, he's writing to a congregation of people. He calls the congregation lady and the members her children. Okay, that's fine. You're not going to be able to prove that from the text, but most people believe it was written to a specific lady who was a member of the church and her children. I can't prove that from the text 100%. So we have to be very careful with some of these things that people get rather dogmatic on, and that get caught up in what I would consider to be academic pursuits, and in those academic pursuits they lose sight of the big picture. Yeah, Seth says, hey Seth, good morning. Seth says, that's true, you can get caught up in the details and miss what the book actually says. That's funny, that's exactly what I just said. Anyway, the elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all those who have known the truth because of the truth which abides in us and will be with us forever. So obviously, from the outset, the first two verses, the key thought, the key word in this text is truth and love. You're going to find truth 5 times in 2 John, and you're going to find the word love 4 times, all in 13 verses. Grace, mercy, and peace be with you from God the Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father, in truth and love. There they are again. I rejoice greatly that I found some of your children walking in truth, as we have received commandment from the Father. Good morning, Miss Marisa. Good to see you today. Walking in truth. We have that same obligation today. There is truth, and that's one thing that John writes about, particularly in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, is truth versus error. John, one of the things that he's going to address is the Antichrist in these 3 letters. And the word Antichrist, anti, means against, A-N-T-I. Anyone who is against Christ is Antichrist. But there were very specific groups of people that John was addressing in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And they were called Gnostics. And that to me, that kind of carries a little weight when we do talk about dating the book, because this was a later 1st century issue that came out. Anyway, Gnostics taught that the flesh, that material, was wholly evil and that it could not defile the soul. And so a Gnostic would believe that Jesus, basically so there are 2 groups of Gnostics. One believed that Jesus Christ was basically an apparition, because if flesh is evil, then Jesus couldn't be the Son of God in flesh. It couldn't be, because flesh is evil. But then there was another group who believed that Jesus and Christ were different beings. Essentially, they believed that Jesus became Christ at baptism, and that the Christ left Jesus at the crucifixion. It's a strange doctrine, but there's actually historical writing about it from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. You can do some of that study on your own. But one of the major themes here, hey, Miss Sharon, and good morning, Mom. One of the main themes in 2nd and 3rd John is that Christ did indeed come in the flesh. Anyway, walking in truth as we have received commandment from the Father, and now I plead with you, lady, not as though I write a new commandment to you, but that which we have from the beginning, that we love one another. This is love, that we walk according to His commandments. And that right there in verse 6 is so key to understanding all of the Bible, to understand what it means to love God and to love one another. Biblical love is always active. It is always doing something. And if you want to flip back a page, I'm not going to read it, but you can flip back to 1 John 3 and read verses 16 through 18. Biblical love is always active. Hey, Barry and Glenda, good to see you guys. This is love, verse 6, that we walk according to His commandments. This is the commandment that, as we have heard from the beginning, you should walk in it. That is, love one another. Here's one of the reasons that we should love one another as Christians. For many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh, the New King James says. And so there you go. There's that idea of Gnosticism. Jesus Christ didn't come in the flesh because the Gnostics believed that the flesh was evil. Therefore, the Son of God couldn't be in flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. Look to yourselves. In other words, be careful, pay close attention, that we do not lose those things which we have worked for, but that we may receive a full reward. False teachers are warned about in both of these little letters here. Whoever transgress here in 2 John 9, comes from a Greek term parabino, and it means to step to the side. It is possible to step aside from the doctrine of Christ and follow something different. So, whoever steps aside and does not remain in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. The specific doctrine of Christ referred to here is, people were saying he didn't come in the flesh. Well, that's stepping aside from the truth. And if people are stepping aside from that truth, they are antichrist and they do not have God. They are not in fellowship with the Father. And here's his admonition to this church, or to these people. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, and again, contextually, the doctrine that he's talking about is found up in verse 7. Good morning, Brian. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him. The King James says, nor bid him Godspeed. For he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. You do not want to be associated with anybody who steps aside from the doctrine of Christ. Who's, again, contextually, who is saying that Jesus Christ didn't come in the flesh. You stay away from them. Don't let them in your house. They're false teachers. For he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. Now, that's pretty straightforward, not hard to understand. Having many things to write to you, I did not wish to do so with pen and ink, or rather with paper and ink. But I hope to come to you and speak face to face, that our joy may be full. The children of your elect sister greet you. So, again, a very short letter and a very specific purpose. You need to walk in love. You need to love one another, because there are many antichrists who deny that Jesus came in the flesh. If they step aside from that doctrine, you better know who they are and you better stay away from them. Good morning, Ruby. All right, let's look at 3 John real quick. The elder, again, John, the old man, the aged, to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. And very similar here. Truth is found 6 times, love is found 3 times. So very similar tone and subject matter, different audience here. Beloved, I pray that you prosper in all things. And I circled that in my Bible. I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. So John wishes and prays for the best for people, not only spiritually, but also physically. And I think that's a good lesson for us. We shouldn't be afraid to pray for the physical health and the physical well-being of people, just as we do their spiritual well-being. I mean, that's what John the Apostle did. I think it's perfectly legitimate. For I rejoiced greatly when brethren came and testified of the truth that is in you, just as you walk in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. That is supreme. And again, this is an inspired apostle writing. And the primary thing he's concerned about is that people are walking in the truth. There's so much error out there. And it's a joy to know other people who are walking in truth and who are faithful to God. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers who have borne witness of your love before the church. Again, biblical love is active. Biblical love is visible. It's not just uttering a few words. It's shown in your action. If you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you will do well. Now, we don't know exactly what he's talking about here or who he's talking about, but something good was going on. And they're commended for it. Because they went forth for his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles, we therefore ought to receive such, that we may become fellow workers for the truth. So here you have cooperation, you have fellowship among people who are walking in love and walking in truth. Now, if people are not walking in love and not walking in the truth, you cannot have fellowship with them. That's what 2 John sets out. And a multitude of other passages in the New Testament. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, so there's going to be a contrast drawn here from verse 9 down through verse 12. So pay attention to it. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence. Now in the English here, that phrase, loves to have the preeminence, that's a phrase. In the Greek language, it's one word, and it means he loves to be the first. This guy loves to be the center. He loves to be the center of attention, you might say. This guy, from what we can tell from the text, was domineering over the church, lording it over the flock, as Peter talks about in 1 Peter chapter 5. He loves to have preeminence among them, does not receive us. He wouldn't even receive an apostle. Think about that. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words. Malicious words. The word prating there's a marginal reading in my Bible here, and it says talking nonsense. You know, sometimes that happens. You got to pay attention to people and pay attention to what's going on around you. This guy was prating against us, talking nonsense with malicious words, and not content with that. That wasn't enough for him. He himself does not receive the brethren and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Putting them out of the church. A word you might substitute there that we hear sometimes today is excommunication. The Bible does not teach the concept of excommunication, of kicking people out of the church. It does teach that if a person departs from the truth and is walking in sin, that we as Christians have the responsibility to withdraw our fellowship from them. We have no right to kick anybody out of the church, as sometimes it's framed. This Diotrephes is something. Do not imitate what is evil. So what I did in my Bible is I circled that little word evil and I drew an arrow back up to the name Diotrephes. He's just told them what Diotrephes is doing, and then he says, don't imitate that, but what is good. Now he's going to illustrate what good is here in just a second. He who does good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius, okay, here's what it means to be good as opposed to evil. Demetrius has a good testimony from all and from the truth itself, and we also bear witness, and you know that our testimony is true. So the contrast is drawn between Diotrephes and Demetrius, good versus evil. Imitate what's good. And his letter here closes the same way to Gaius as it did to the elect lady and her children. I had many things to write, but I do not wish to write to you with pen and ink, but I hope to see you shortly, and we shall speak face to face. Peace to you. Our friends greet you. Greet the friends by name. So again, very short, very to the point, a very targeted audience, a very targeted purpose. 2 John, you better watch those who are not holding the doctrine. 3 John, watch out for Diotrephes, and Demetrius is commended for his good work. Well, this is called the shortest books of the Bible. 27 verses, there you go, 2nd and 3rd John. Okay, hey David. David says, I suppose nowadays it's not so much Gnosticism, but other false doctrines from Jehovah's Witnesses to Mormonism and other teaching that would lead a person not to have God. Yeah, there were very specific problems, David, in the first century that we don't face today. Just, okay, for instance, circumcision. You know, you go back to Acts chapter 15, and there's a major dispute in the church in Jerusalem because Christians who came from Jewish background were telling Christians who came from a Gentile background that if they wanted to be saved, they needed to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses. We don't really face that issue today. Another issue that they faced in the first century that we don't face today was meat that had been offered to idols. You know, meat that was being sold in the markets. Part of that animal had been used in idol worship, and the rest of it was sold. And so some Christians had a conscience issue. If I buy that meat and eat it, I'm worshiping that idol. So there are some things like that I would say those specific details don't apply today, but the principles still apply. So, and not only what you mentioned here, David, like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormonism, but false doctrines that arise within the church itself. Man, you cover a lot of ground right there. Well, Connie, people do still think Israel is God's chosen people, and I've commented on that before. The United States foreign policy is based on the idea that Israel is still God's chosen people. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Okay, walk in the truth, walk in love. That's 2nd and 3rd John. And as you're doing that, there are some things to watch out for, and there are some things to keep on doing. Seth says, it's amazing how quickly after the establishment of the church they had to deal with false teaching, and it really is. But Jesus, you go back to Matthew 7 in the Sermon on the Mount. Watch out for wolves who are in sheep's clothing. He told his disciples, I'm sending you out in a very dangerous world like that. And so you have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. It is. So a passage that comes to my mind is Galatians 1, verses 6 through 9, where Paul tells the churches of Galatia. And it's not, the book of Galatians is not written to one congregation. It's written to an entire region of congregations. He says, I marvel that you are so soon removed from him who called you into the grace of Christ unto a different gospel. So the apostles themselves were amazed. But error has always been around. Deceit has always been around since the original deception there in Genesis chapter 3. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I appreciate you being on here. Yeah, people don't change. Evil still wants to tear apart the church. And, sometimes it's like Diotrephes. It's somebody who wants the preeminence. It's somebody who wants a prominent position. They like attention. Pride still is an issue, and it always will be. All right, guys, thanks for being on here today. I'm going to wrap it up. I look forward to coming back tomorrow. We're going to study the book of Jude tomorrow, an interesting document. If you have anybody who doesn't do Facebook but who would like to do these studies, send them over to our YouTube channel. All this content is uploaded there. All right, guys, hope you have a good day. Hey, by the way, we're going to go live again tonight at 7 o'clock here at Mammoth Spring. We're working our way through a study called The Last Enemy, and we've been talking about death and the afterlife. Last week we talked about hell. We've talked a great deal about Hades in that class, and tonight we're gonna probably not finish a study on heaven. So if you're not able to get out tonight for whatever reason, our live stream will be available at 7 p.m. All right, guys, have a good day, and I hope to see you back here tomorrow at 11 o'clock.